My daughter-in-law handed me a name badge at Christmas dinner. It said housekeeper. Not Linda. Not mom. Just housekeeper. Like that was all I was worth. Her parents laughed first. Then my son smiled, that small, proud smile that hurt far deeper than shouting ever could, and he said, "Food's for family." I stood there holding a pie I baked with love, and suddenly I felt like a stranger in a house I helped them buy. And in that single moment, something inside me cracked, quietly, like a glass too hot for cold water. Before I take you into everything that followed, the shock, the humiliation, the choice I made that no one saw coming, I want to welcome you properly. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me continue sharing the truths I've carried for years. Now, let me start back at the beginning, because no story becomes this painful overnight. My name is Linda, 6 years old that Christmas, and I was raised in a world where mothers poured themselves into their children like water into soil, hoping love would grow into something beautiful. I married young, worked hard, built a home not grand but filled with warmth. My husband, Mark, used to tell me I had a gift for making people feel safe. That mattered to me more than diamonds ever could. When Daniel, our only child, was born, I swore he would always know love. I cooked homemade meals even when tired, sat up with him through fevers, clapped the loudest at school concerts. Later, when college bills piled up, Mark and I worked extra shifts. We helped with his loan, helped him get his first apartment, later even contributed to the down payment of the house he now calls his own. I never thought keeping score was necessary. Love doesn't need receipts, or so I believed. When Mark passed away 5 years ago, grief hollowed the center of my world. Daniel was my anchor, or maybe I clung to him so hard I didn't notice him drifting. I cooked for him more often, babysat whenever needed, cleaned quietly behind everyone. Rachel, his wife, was distant at first, but I assumed time would soften her. In my heart, family meant patience, maybe too much patience. Looking back, there were signs, small ones, like crumbs before the feast. The way Rachel's smile thinned when I offered advice. The way Daniel sighed when I mentioned holidays past. How invitations grew shorter, more conditional, only if you can help with the kids, or come early to prep. But love has a way of blinding us. You tell yourself they are busy, they are stressed, don't take it personally. You swallow hurt like medicine, even when it tastes like poison. So when Daniel invited me for Christmas dinner last year, after weeks of silence, I felt relief. Excitement even. I baked 2 pies from Mark's old recipe, bought gifts for the grandkids, wrapped them carefully with ribbons. I wanted it to feel like the old days, just once more. I arrived early, like always. The house smelled of rosemary and roasted meat. Laughter spilled from the dining room, plates clinking, wine being poured, chairs scraping across hardwood. 11 chairs. I noticed it immediately. 11 chairs set for dinner, and we were 12. But I pushed the thought away. I told myself there must be another chair somewhere, maybe still in the living room. Then Rachel walked up to me, handed me a badge as casually as one hands a receipt, and said, "Wear this so people know where to ask for things." And there it was, the moment love cracked clean in half. Because a badge isn't just plastic. It's meaning. It's status. It's a declaration. And mine said I wasn't family. I didn't throw the pie. I didn't cry. I just stood there, hands trembling, heart heavy, realizing I was no longer a guest, just labor dressed as kindness. But they had no idea what that silent moment started inside me. A storm, a reckoning, a woman remembering her worth. Before that Christmas, before the badge and the smike, my world looked different. I want you to picture it with me, not the pain, not yet, but the quiet, ordinary life that made the later betrayal sting as sharply as it did. Years back, holidays in our home were noisy in the best way. Mark and I would wake before sunrise, brewing coffee while cinnamon rolls baked in the oven. Daniel, still a boy then, would race down the hallway barefoot, hair messy, cheeks flushed with excitement. He'd jump into Mark's arms and shout, "Let's open presents," even though he knew we never started without breakfast. Those memories glow in my mind like warm embers, bittersweet now, but bright. Mark was the kind of man who could fix anything: leaky sinks, broken hearts, tense rooms. He used humor like a key, turning stubborn locks in people. He'd tell me, "Linda, your kindness is what keeps this house standing." I always thought he was exaggerating. Now I think he saw something I didn't. The three of us were a team back then. We planned birthdays together, took road trips to little diners off the highway, spent lazy Sundays watching old movies under a shared blanket. Our life was simple, but love made it feel full. When Daniel left for college, the house went quiet, too quiet. I filled the silence by baking, gardening, volunteering at the local library. Mark would find me elbow deep in dough and laugh. "You're preparing for grandchildren already, aren't you?" Maybe I was. Then came Rachel. Daniel brought her home one Thanksgiving. She was beautiful, poised, polished in a way that made me suddenly aware of my flour-dusted apron and wrinkled hands. She hugged me politely, not warmly, and complimented the meal without tasting much of it. Still, I told myself she was shy. New to the family. Love needed time. I remember the first small warning sign, a quick moment, barely a second. Daniel was showing her old family photos, and she paused at one of him and me in the backyard, covered in paint after we redecorated his treehouse. She said lightly, "You two were a little too close, maybe." Then she laughed, but her eyes didn't. I ignored it. Why wouldn't I? I wanted her to feel welcomed. When they got married, Mark and I paid for most of the wedding without being asked. We were proud. Daniel's smile shined that day, genuine, full. Rachel looked lovely too, radiant even. I stood in the front row believing life was unfolding beautifully. But slowly, the tone shifted, not loud enough to alarm me, but persistent enough to change things. Calls from Daniel grew shorter. Visits became less spontaneous and more transactional. Instead of "come for dinner," it became "can you bring dinner?" Then Mark passed. Cancer moved fast, taking pieces of him day by day until only memory remained. I became a widow in a house too big for one person, holding his mug in the mornings just to feel close to him. Daniel comforted me at first. He visited often, brought flowers, called nightly. But grief has its own gravity, and eventually, people stepped back. Rachel returned to work. Daniel got busy. The phone rang less. Still, I stayed hopeful. I babysat their children when never needed, sometimes overnight. I cleaned without being asked, ironed shirts, folded laundry. I thought I was helping. I thought this was love expressing itself. But something quiet changed in Daniel, a shift behind the eyes, a colder tone. Sometimes he'd speak to me like someone doing a favor by tolerating me. I shrugged it off as stress, exhaustion, adulthood. Until the moment at Christmas proved it wasn't exhaustion. It was entitlement, distance, a belief that I was there to serve, not to belong. I didn't know it then, but the foundation had already begun to crack. The real change started the year before that Christmas, quietly, like a draft under a door. You don't notice it at first, not until the room is cold enough that you start shivering. Looking back, there was one evening that should have warned me everything was about to shift. Daniel had invited me over for a Sunday dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, something quick. When I arrived, Rachel was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. "Kitchen's there," she said, gesturing with her chin. I paused, holding the casserole dish I'd baked earlier. "Oh, I thought you were cooking," I said lightly. She blinked at me like the idea confused her. "No, we thought you were." I laughed softly, thinking maybe we'd miscommunicated. "I can help, but I didn't bring ingredients." Daniel came out from the hallway at that exact moment, adjusting his shirt like he'd just finished getting ready. He kissed Rachel on the head, then said, "Mom's great at putting together meals. You don't mind, right?" Mind? No one had ever asked if I minded anything. But I cooked anyway. Boiled the pasta. Made sauce from scratch. Set the table. Rachel never left the couch. While we ate, she mentioned her parents were coming into town soon. Daniel smiled and said, "Mom can help get the house ready before they arrive." The words came so naturally from him, as though he were assigning a task to staff, not speaking to the woman who raised him. I remember sitting there with my fork paused midair, forcing a smile while my stomach tightened. But love makes excuses. I told myself they were tired, busy, young. I told myself this phase would pass. It didn't. One afternoon weeks later, I stopped by unexpectedly, something I used to do often. I had baked cookies for the grandkids and thought it would be a nice surprise. I let myself in with the key Daniel gave me years ago. The house was messy, toys thrown everywhere, dishes stacked high, laundry baskets spilling over. Rachel came down the stairs, saw me in the entryway, and froze. "Oh," she said, not happy or relieved, just startled. "You should text first." I apologized immediately, holding out the cookies like peace offerings. She didn't take them. Instead, she walked over to the side table, picked up a key, and held it out to me. "We're changing the lock soon." Just like that. No explanation, no smile. I stood there stunned as she added, "We'll give you a copy if we need you to watch the kids." If. Need. To watch the kids. Not because we want you here, only if they needed help. Later that evening, I told Daniel how that moment felt. He shrugged and said, "Rachel likes privacy. Don't take it personally." But how could I not? That house, I helped them buy it. That key used to feel like trust. Now it felt like a leash being pulled tighter. Small things kept piling up. Rachel would criticize how I folded towels. Daniel would joke about me being old-fashioned, but in a tone that didn't sound like a joke. Invitations came with conditions. "Come early. Bring dessert. Can you sweep the patio?" I tried so hard to stay grateful that I ignored the growing ache inside me, that sense of being useful, but not loved. The final straw, the moment I could no longer pretend everything was normal, came 2 days before Christmas. Rachel called me in the morning. No hello, no how are you, just her voice sharp and rushed. "Can you come clean the house before dinner?" she asked. Not help prepare, not join us. Clean. I hesitated, and she exhaled loudly, like my pause inconvenienced her. "We have guests coming. It'll be easier if the place is spotless." I hung up after agreeing, because that's what I always did. I showed up. I served. I smiled. But something in my chest felt heavy, like a storm forming. And that storm followed me right into Christmas night, where everything finally broke open. 2 days before Christmas, purse on my shoulder, cleaning supplies in my trunk, I drove to Daniel and Rachel's house with a knot in my stomach. It was snowing softly, the kind of snow that used to make me want to bake cookies and hum old Christmas songs. But that morning, the world felt gray, muted, like someone dimmed the lights on a holiday that used to glow. When I arrived, Rachel answered the door with headphones on, barely looking at me. She just pointed toward the living room like I was a delivery driver. No greeting, no warmth. I placed my coat on the chair and started cleaning, dusting shelves, vacuuming, scrubbing counters. I told myself this was helping, this was love, this was what mothers do. Hours passed before Daniel came downstairs. He didn't say thank you, just looked around and nodded. "You missed a spot on the window," he said casually, tapping the glass with his finger. I felt heat rise in my face, not anger yet, more like shame, confusion. I cleaned it again without a word. That's when Rachel's parents arrived. They walked in laughing, arms full of gifts, the kind of arrival that once would have filled me with joy. Rachel hugged them warmly, warmer than she ever hugged me, and said loudly, almost performing it, "Good thing Linda was here to clean. Otherwise this place would be a disaster." Her mother gave a quick amused glance toward me, then whispered, not quietly enough, "Well, every house needs help." Help. Not family. Not loved. Just help. I smiled tightly, because what else do you do when you've been demoted without notice? They moved around me like I was invisible, stepping over the vacuum cord, placing coats right where I'd just dusted. I kept working, kept swallowing the bitterness building at the back of my throat. I thought maybe, just maybe, Christmas Day would be better. I was wrong. Christmas morning, I arrived early again, dressed in the red sweater Mark always said made my eyes warm. I held gifts for everyone, even Rachel's parents, hoping gestures might soften hearts. Rachel opened the door, looked at the bags in my arms, and said, "Just put those near the kitchen. We'll sort them." She walked away before I could reply. I stood in the doorway, cold still clinging to my coat, looking at the house full of noise and smell of roasted turkey. I shouldn't have felt out of place there, but I did. In the kitchen, I overheard Rachel and her mother talking, voices hushed but not enough. "She's clingy," Rachel said. "Always around. I don't want her thinking she can drop by whenever." Her mother chuckled. "You have to set boundaries early. Otherwise they take over." I froze. Boundaries? After everything I'd given? My time, my love, my money? I set the gifts down quietly, heart sinking. I turned to leave the kitchen, but before I could take a step, I heard Daniel join them. "So Mom will handle the dishes tonight, right?" he asked as if organizing chores. Rachel nodded. "And she'll watch the kids when we go skiing next weekend. Free babysitting." Daniel laughed. "She doesn't have much else going on." Those words, they hit harder than any slap could have. Not much else going on. As if my life had melted down to their convenience. As if widowhood made me furniture instead of family. I wanted to walk out right then, but I stayed. Because part of me still believed Christmas might soften something. I held on to hope like a frayed rope. Dinner time arrived. The table shimmered, golden plates, tall candles, fancy folded napkins. Everyone gathered around, chatter filling the room. And there, hanging from the back of one chair, was a neat white name badge. Not with Daniel's name. Not Rachel's. Mine. Housekeeper. Rachel pinned it on my sweater before I could react, her fingers quick and practiced like she'd planned it. Laughter erupted like a rehearsed punchline. My heart didn't break in one loud shatter. It cracked quietly, endlessly. Daniel didn't defend me. He didn't even look ashamed. He just said, under his breath but loud enough for me to hear, "Remember, Mom, help in the kitchen first." And that was the moment I finally saw the truth clearly. Not a misunderstanding, not stress, not busyness. I wasn't family to them. I was labor disguised as love. But they had no idea what that clarity would awaken in me. The kind of clarity that doesn't cry, it transforms. I stood there with that name badge pinned to my chest, listening to laughter echo around the room like a cruel joke I didn't understand anymore. For a moment, I thought I might cry, right there in front of all of them. But the tears didn't come. Instead, something steadier settled inside me. A stillness, a strange calm that felt almost like awakening. I took a breath, slow, deep, and walked to the kitchen just as they expected. I placed the pie gently on the counter. The room was warm, but I felt cold in a way winter can't cause. I washed dishes quietly, listening as they opened gifts in the other room without calling my name. Every plate I rinsed felt like washing away another year of sacrifice. Every glass I dried felt like reclaiming another piece of myself. They thought I was serving, but really, I was thinking, calculating. When dinner was finally served, I stood by the doorway holding a tray, watching them sit, all 12 of them, except there were only 11 chairs. Someone eventually noticed. "Where's Mom sitting?" Rachel's father asked. Rachel shrugged. "She'll eat later." Daniel didn't correct her. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer his chair. My own son, the boy I nursed, raised, fought for, sat there with his family while I stood like an employee waiting for instructions. That should have destroyed me. Instead, it crystallized something inside my soul. "I see where I stand," I whispered to myself. And with that, I stepped out of the doorway. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I simply put down the tray and quietly removed the badge from my sweater. I slipped it into my pocket, not as compliance, but as evidence. After dinner, while everyone lounged with full stomachs and wine in hand, I wandered through the house in silence. I looked at the furniture I helped pay for. The backyard swing set I bought for the kids. The framed wedding photos I funded. Every corner held pieces of me, and none of them remembered. Upstairs, I stopped at a hallway table where a photo of Mark and me used to sit. It was gone, replaced by a picture of Rachel's parents at a vineyard. A tiny thing, but tiny things make earthquakes. I searched the guest room, the one I used to sleep in when helping during newborn nights. My blanket wasn't there. My pillow replaced. My knitting supplies gone from the drawer. It wasn't my room anymore. It wasn't even a room meant for me. It was just space. Space they'd rather give to guests than to the woman who raised their son. That night, I didn't stay long. I told Daniel I was leaving early. He barely looked up from his phone. Already? We still need help with cleanup, he said. Not thanks for coming. Not safe drive. Just a task. I walked to the front door without answering. When his kids hugged me goodbye, sticky hands, warm little bodies, I held them tight. They were innocent in all this. They loved me in the pure way only children do. Grandma, will you stay? One of them asked. My heart ached, but I kissed their foreheads, smiled, and said softly, not tonight, sweetheart. Out in my car, engine off, I sat in the dark for a long time. Snow fell in slow, quiet flakes. I watched the house glow through frosted windows, warm laughter inside, cold silence where I sat today. That was the moment I made a decision. I would no longer beg for a seat at a table I helped build. I went home, pulled out old files, bank transfers, receipts, loan agreements. The down payment I contributed wasn't a gift. It was documented as a temporary loan while they saved, something they conveniently forgot. But I hadn't. I opened Mark's old safe and found paperwork he kept, Daniel's college fund contributions, the car loan we helped pay off, even the signed acknowledgement for the house deposit. For years, I thought keeping these documents was unnecessary. I thought love doesn't need proof. But that night, those papers felt like armor. I wasn't thinking revenge. Not yet. I was thinking boundaries, respect, dignity. A plan formed quietly. A plan built not from anger, but clarity. I realized they expected me to keep giving. But they never imagined what would happen if I finally stopped. And when I stop, I don't do it halfway. Christmas was over, but something much bigger was about to begin. The next week passed slowly, like a long breath before a scream. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't visit. No dropping by with food. No babysitting. Silence, thick, deliberate, filled the gap where my presence used to be. By day 3, Rachel texted me. We need you to watch the kids Friday. Confirm. I stayed at the screen. No please. No how are you. Just expectation, like always. I typed one word. Unavailable. Minutes later, Daniel called. What do you mean unavailable? He asked, voice tight. I have plans, I said evenly. With who? Myself. He scoffed, like the idea was ridiculous. Mom, you know we count on you. We're going skiing with her parents. I let a beat of silence sit heavy. Daniel, I said quietly, I'm not the housekeeper. I'm not the nanny. I'm your mother. He exhaled sharply. Here we go again. Those words, dismissive, bored, snapped something final inside me. I opened my folder of documents, papers spread across my kitchen table like a battlefield map. Not fueled by rage, but by resolve. Daniel, I said, voice steady, we need to talk in person. Both of you. He sounded annoyed, but he agreed. We scheduled Saturday. When the day came, I dressed simply, clean blouse, Mark's old watch on my wrist for strength. I brought one folder, evidence of years they forgot I helped build. I drove to their home without baked goods, without gifts, without expectation. When Rachel opened the door, surprise flashed across her face, as if she expected me to be carrying laundry detergent instead of a spine. Sit, I said, not a request. Something in my tone made them both obey. I placed the documents on the dining table, the same table where I had no seat at Christmas. This time, I sat at the head myself. Rachel frowned. What's this about? I slid the down payment agreement forward. This, I said, is the $48,000 mark and I contributed when you bought this house. You both signed that it was a loan. Daniel blinked, confusion replaced by discomfort. I added the college payments, the car payments, the receipts, dates, signatures. You both said you'd repay when you were stable. You're more than stable now. Rachel's voice cracked. Why bring this up now? I looked at Daniel, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see my little boy. I saw a man who forgot who stood behind him. Because I won't be used anymore, I said. Not for babysitting, not for cleaning, not for convenience. Rachel's face flushed. Are you threatening us? No, my voice was calm as snowfall. I'm collecting what I am owed. Respect or repayment. Daniel stood abruptly. Mom, you can't just. I raised a hand. He froze. I gave you love freely, but money was an agreement. And if I don't see change, I'll pursue legal repayment. Silence dropped heavy in the room, not anger, but realization. Rachel's mother's photo stared at me from the wall, where my picture used to hang. It fueled me, not with bitterness, but clarity. Rachel swallowed hard. What exactly do you want? I met Daniel's eyes. A seat at the table. Real family, not chores. Or, if that's too much, repayment in full within 60 days. His jaw tightened. Pride warred with guilt in his expression. And then Rachel spoke softly, the first soft thing she'd offered me in years. She deserves respect, Daniel. He looked at her, stunned, then at me, then at the documents again. Finally, he Saturday, shoulders lowered, voice cracked. Mom, I'm sorry. Not perfect, not enough to erase years, but real. Rachel nodded slowly. We've taken advantage. I see that now. I let the silence stretch, not to wound, but to let truth settle. I'm willing to forgive, I said gently, but not to be invisible. Daniel wiped his eyes. My son again, just for a moment. We want you here, he said. As family, not help. I felt tears then, warm, quiet, but they weren't pain anymore. They were release. I reached into my purse and placed the housekeeper badge on the table between us. This stays here, I said. I'm done carrying it. No shouting, no grand scene, just dignity returned. And in that dining room where I once had no chair, my voice finally took its seat. The conversation that day didn't fix everything instantly. Life isn't a movie where one apology wipes away years of quiet wounds. But it was the first real crack of light through a long dark tunnel. After I placed the badge on the table, no one touched it. It sat there like a symbol of everything unspoken, everything broken, everything that finally had a voice. Daniel asked if I would stay for lunch. I said no, not out of spite, but because for once, I wanted to choose myself. I walked out calmly, coat on, spine straight, heart strangely light. Snow was falling again, like on Christmas night, but this time it didn't feel cold. It felt cleansing. Driving home, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, in a peaceful way, like a cup drained of someone else's expectations. I made tea, curled up in Mark's old chair, and let the quiet settle. No rushing to help, no waiting for a phone call, just breathing, mine. The next few days were unusually silent. I half expected Daniel to call immediately, but he didn't. Maybe pride held him back, maybe shame, maybe both. Instead, a week later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, the sight almost took my breath. Daniel stood there holding a framed photo, the one that used to sit in their hallway, of me and Mark smiling under the old oak tree. Behind him, Rachel held a grocery bag, filled with fresh vegetables and a jar of honey I used to buy. No assumptions, no demands, no badge. Mom, Daniel said, voice soft, we want to start again. The right way. Those words landed gently, like snow on branches instead of hail. He stepped inside and handed me the photo. We replaced the one at home, he admitted quietly. Yours should never have disappeared. Something inside my chest loosened. A knot I'd carried for years finally untied. Rachel stepped forward next. No arrogance, no sharpness, only sincerity. I'm sorry, she said, eyes meeting mine. I didn't realize how much you cared for us. I should have treated you like family, not help. I believed her not because she said it perfectly, but because her voice trembled. Real remorse has a sound. We talked for hours that afternoon. Not about chores or favors, but about boundaries, feelings, respect. I told them how isolating widowhood can be, how service without gratitude turns love into labor. Daniel opened up too, how he struggled after Mark died, how he leaned on me not out of entitlement at first, but habit. The habit grew, and gratitude shrank. Rachel admitted something I never expected: insecurity. She confessed she always felt compared to me, that she feared Daniel and I were too close, that she might never measure up to the woman who raised him. That realization softened me. Pain looks different from each side of a truth. By evening, we made an agreement, simple, honest. I'd help when I wanted to, not when expected. I'd be invited to dinners, not assigned chores. I'd be family, not staff. And if boundaries were crossed, we'd talk, not swallow resentment. The next Sunday, they invited me over. No lists, no cleaning supplies waiting at the door. When I arrived, the table was set with 12 chairs, one of them pulled out for me. A plate with my name, not a badge. Daniel hugged me before I even reached my seat. Rachel handed me a cup of tea and said, "Sit, relax. You're our guest today." And for the first time in years, I felt it. Not tolerated, not used, but wanted. The kids ran to me with drawings they made. The house was warm, laughter gentle, and a quiet, soft thought came to me. Maybe family can break. Maybe it can heal too. Not the same, but sometimes better, because now it's honest. I didn't need to be their servant. I didn't need repayment. What I needed was respect. And now, I had it. In the weeks that followed, things didn't become perfect. Life doesn't smooth out that easily, but they became different. Softened. More balanced. I visited because I wanted to, not because I was expected to. When I walked through their door, it wasn't with rubber gloves in my bag. It was with dessert, or a new book for the kids, or sometimes simply with nothing but myself. And that was enough. Daniel called me more often, not to ask for favors, just to talk. Sometimes about work, sometimes about memories of Mark. Sometimes he'd say, "I miss Dad," and I'd sit with him in that feeling, no fixing, no rushing. We learned how to be family again, not built on habit or service, but choice. Rachel changed too. She started reaching out, not with requests, but with invitations. "Come have brunch with us. We bought tea you might like. Can you show me that recipe of Mark's?" There were still moments where I had to gently remind them boundaries don't hold themselves, but I carried myself differently now. Not like a shadow in their hallway, but like a woman with history, worth, and voice. One afternoon, I found something taped inside my gift bag after a family dinner, a small card, handwritten by Rachel. "Thank you for being patient while I learned how to love you right." I cried in my car, not because of pain this time, but because of healing. I realized something important. You can love people deeply, but still teach them how to treat you. Love without boundaries becomes servitude. Warmth without respect becomes labor. And silence can turn love into resentment if we aren't brave enough to speak. Sometimes the only way to change a story is to stop letting others hold the pen. Looking back at that Christmas night, the badge, the empty chair, the laughter at my expense, I no longer feel humiliation. I feel gratitude, because that moment forced me to rediscover my voice, to reclaim my dignity, to remember that motherhood doesn't mean martyrdom. I still keep that housekeeper badge in a drawer, not as a wound, but as a reminder of the day I finally stood up from the corner of a room I built and took my seat at the table again. Not because they gave it, but because I claimed it. If someone listening to me right now is in that place, giving more than you receive, shrinking to fit someone else's comfort, hear me clearly. You are allowed to draw a line. You are allowed to stop pouring from a cup no one refills. You are allowed to choose yourself. Respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you require. Family is love, yes, But love without respect is just work in nicer clothes. And if you ever find yourself standing in a room full of people who forget your wife, remember, leaving isn't always losing. Sometimes it's how you win yourself back. Life is too short to live as a badge instead of a name. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. And I'll leave you with one final thought. Never let anyone convince you that your only value is what you do for them. Your value is who you are, even when they forget.